Brian, test.
One, two, three, four, five. One, two, three. Yep, that's it.
All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the Springford Area School District Board of Directors meeting for March 28th, 2022. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Didn't hit the gavel.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all.
The Springford Board of School Directors believes the community has the right to bring before the board issues and concerns they may have about items on the agenda or about items in general which affect the district or their children. Because of this belief and philosophy, the board will schedule a time at the beginning and conclusion of every meeting to have an opportunity for community members to share their concerns with the board. At the start of the meeting, members from the public may comment on agenda items only. The school board will move through the meeting agenda. Then at the end, when prompted, there will be a time for public comment. This meeting is being filmed to be broadcast on community cable channels and online. Individuals attending to make public comment should be aware that they are being videotaped. Speakers will be asked to state their name and address before making their comment.
All right, good evening. Mrs. Bickert, can you give us the attendance for today?
Yes, Mrs. Earl is with us on Zoom, and Mrs. Sullivan is absent. Mrs. Deerdorf, Mr. Jackson, Mrs. Weingarten, Mr. Schaefer, Dr. Wright, Mrs. Hermans, and Mrs. Zazowski are all present.
Thank you very much. Do we have any announcements?
Is that a new procedure?
Having,
Roll call.
yes, as opposed to having, right, Brits has been the last since January.
Okay.
Any announcements?
We do not have any announcements this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Rizzo?
No announcements.
All right, if there are no announcements, the first thing is the public to be heard on agenda items only. Is there anyone here in our room that has something they would like to talk about? May approach the podium, give your name and address.
Yeah. Hi, it's Tony Patrick, Upper Providence Township. One, I don't understand which agenda item I would be able to speak on because it's so confusion. So as a grandparent and alumni,
Ma'am, do you have an agenda item to speak on?
okay, how about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I'm saying there's a bunch of them here. So,
I would ask if you could identify, please.
okay, so let's see. I get my time back, right? I'm telling you, it's a lot of stuff here. I can't say like one, the public, I'm the public to be heard.
Well,
Two, the president.
ma'am.
Okay, you know what?
Ma'am,
2B.
Hold on.
2B.
Okay, go ahead. Tell me what you want to.
And I get my time back.
Yeah,
please.
because there's a non-agenda
there
section.
was.
There's a
Okay,
non-agenda section.
2B. Keep talking. So as a grandparent and as an alumnus of this Springford, and we see a victory going on here. And this battle that you guys are doing it's against with the Lord here. So we are aware that
Ma'am,
one is going on in the public schools. Yes,
Ma'am,
many of us
there's
are
a non-
slacked in this area, but no more.
Okay, ma'am,
We have two
there's a
experiences. One is
non-agenda
happening.
section to the.
I'm getting there.
No, ma'am, what I'm saying is there's a non-agenda section of this agenda where you can speak to non-agenda items.
I am going to. It's like 2. That's what I'm saying. It's 2B. You guys make this thing so confusing that me being like a Springford student, I can't understand it all. So how do you say when I can or cannot talk about again?
I'm
trying to get to it.
I give you one more chance and then you can do it at the second public comment.
What? So I'm talking, okay, wherever this, the curriculum, instruction, educational technology and stuff is here. So with the CDC that says that the masking had to be like lowered.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. You will have a second comment section. This is agenda items only. If you do not have.
So, okay, explain to me what the B is. I want an explanation of B.
Ms.
I want a full explanation index.
Well, ma'am, there's going to be a presentation on B, which is a presentation. It's not an action item.
But that's part of the agenda, isn't it? This is a 100-page agenda, isn't it? When I print out the agenda, is it 100 pages? Anybody?
Ms. Wright,
So what
do
is
not
this
believe she's speaking
specific
on it.
agenda? Where does it start? Where does it end?
So we really want to hear what you have to say, but if it's not specifically related to something on the agenda, then there's the time at the end of the meeting that we would happy to hear you speak.
Page 17 is the end of the agenda. Okay.
So is there anybody else in the room who would like to speak here? Is there anyone on Zoom?
No, there is not.
Since there is no more public to be heard on agenda items at this time, then we are going to move into our presentations. The first presentation we have is from Mr. David Krakauer, the 12th grade House principal, to present our 5 National Merit finalists. Thank you.
Thank you, school board. Thank you, Mr. Rizzo. Appreciate the opportunity to present 5 wonderful students this evening. Springford Senior High School is pleased to announce that 5 of our senior students have been proclaimed finalists in the 2022 National Merit Scholarship Program. The following students are being honored tonight for advancing to this level. These young people were recognized by the school board in October for achieving the semifinal status in the preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship qualifying test, a group that represents less than 1% of the entrants, the highest scoring in each state. As semifinalists, they had to fulfill several requirements before advancing to the finalist stage. Submit a detailed scholarship application, which included a self-descriptive essay and information about their participation in leadership in school and community activities, as well as maintain their high academic performance. These students each now have the potential of receiving a monetary award. Approximately 7,500 finalists will be selected as monetary winners and are typically notified within the next month or so. Merit scholarship winners are academic champions who will be the leaders of tomorrow. Springford is very proud of these 5 students. We would like to recognize them and their families who are here with them this evening and present them with their certificates of merit from the National Merit Scholarship Program. So when I call your name up, if you can please come up to be recognized. If you can stay up here until all 5 students are called, we'll then have a picture at the end, okay? Our first recipient is Jacob Collier. Arnab Gupta. I've been practicing this next student's name and he knows it. So I'm hoping I get it right, Braden, all right? All right. Braden Krajcerovic. Raul Palala. And Lisbeth Verghese.
Thank you, and congratulations to all of them. It's just wonderful to be able to acknowledge our students, our merit scholarship winners. Our next presentation tonight is Mrs. Catherine Gardy, our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Educational Technology, to present on the 2020-2021 PSSA Assessment and Keystone exam results. Thank you.
Good evening. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. I think we're just getting our slides up and ready. I jokingly said when I pulled in, there were so many cars in the parking lot, it was definitely for all the students, but I think there's a game out there. So, all right, so it looks like we have our slides up and ready. So thank you tonight for listening to this presentation. We were going to discuss just the PSSA results and the Keystone results from the 2020-2021 school year. So a couple of items that we're going to address first are the district summary data, which includes the ELA, English Language Arts, by grade, which is the grades 3 through 8 data, mathematics by grade, and our students take those assessments grades 3 to 8, and then science by grades, and those students take those assessments in grades 4 and 8. Additionally, we're going to talk about the cohort data. Cohort data, I'll explain a little bit more in detail about how that is calculated. We're going to talk about the Future Ready PA Index and action plans that we have for this year and moving forward. Just as we go into some of this, I want to make sure that we take into some considerations. Overall, the PSSA state participation rate was down about 27% last year. Again, the ranges from participation range from anywhere from 69% to 76% across the Commonwealth. Keystone data, that even was a farther drop. The Algebra 1 Keystone exam was about a 15% decrease across the state. The biology was about a 52% decrease, and the literature was a 91% decrease. That decrease for 91%, it really is attributed to many school districts have their students take that Keystone either in 9th grade or 10th grade, and those students then were waived in that 2020 school year. So just kind of thinking about what happened in that year, they were able to take that assessment then moving forward with the basically proficient score, given that the state gave that waiver in 2020. Additionally, I want to make note that there was about a 52% drop in the reportable exams across the entire state in all content areas. And our participation rate was anywhere between 65.8% all the way up to 97.6%. That includes all grade levels, buildings, et cetera. And then as we get into the rankings, I really want to make sure that we're paying close attention to, this is relative numbers to the number of schools and the number of students that have taken this assessment across the state. So a little bit out of sorts compared to maybe what we would have seen in different years. And just another note, we typically have a consistency participation rate of 95% or higher. So knowing that all of that, I just want to frame that conversation as we go into this data. So I want to make sure as we're doing this, we really can't draw conclusions, but I just want to make sure that we have understandings that there was a significant decrease in overall participation, which will obviously likely impact the results both here and across the state. So as we get into this, what I tried to do is have each slide when we're looking at trends to be similar. So I'm going to take an extra second or so at this particular slide to make note of how they're set up. So this is the 3rd grade trends. This is trends across different students across different years. So at the top, you'll see which grade level it is. In this case, we're looking at grade 3, the English Language Arts and Math trends. The numbers on the side are the percent proficient and advanced. That's what the bars represent. And then at the bottom, it is the ELA on the left-hand side, and then math. And when we get to science, the science will be on the next column. And then you can see at the bottom, we have 2018, 2019, and 2021. Again, we missed the 2020 year data. So what I did was I went back and looked at the trends from 18, 19, and then information from 2021. So I'll just kind of point out a little bit here as we go through. Obviously, you can take any notes. I can take questions at the end. But taking a look at our 3rd grade information from 18, 19, and 21, you can see that we have the proficiency rate around that 78 to 79% or so for ELA, and around between that 72 and 75% for math. for third grade. Similar setup for fourth grade, as I had mentioned, the fourth graders take the science exam as well. So you'll be able to see here that we have the percent proficient and advanced, again, for the 18, 19, and 2021 school years. We always really do very well in our science exams in fourth grade, so you can see that trend over time. But the dip did happen a little bit in math, and you'll see that across each of the grade levels. I think as we go through this, you'll be able to see that math did take a little bit of a hit in the overall scores, but you'll see in our rankings, we really held true to our rankings across the state. So we'll get into some of those action plans in a little bit. I jokingly said that committee, you know, when we look at the previous slide, for some of us, our brains really look at the graphs, and some of us like to look at tables. So I did set this table up. So across the top here, we have the by subject, grade, then again, the percentage for advanced or proficient for 18, 19, and 21. And then that's the state average of their proficient level. And then I showed that the plus that we have in our district for the number of percentage of students outperforming the state average. So just taking a look again, same information on those previous slides, but knowing and taking a look that we outperformed the state by anywhere from that 13.8% in science all the way up to that 26.9% in that fourth grade math. So I'll just give you a second to take a look at that. And then below that, we'll talk a little bit about our rankings. And I know it's a little bit on the smaller side, but looking at the bottom of the slide there, it says grade 3 ELA ranking. This is again, when we're thinking about all of our schools in the elementary buildings, we ranged anywhere from the top 2% to the top 35% in the state. And then in math, it was anywhere from the top 5% to the top 30% in the state. And then going over to the other side with ELA, you can take a look at the same thing. For fourth grade, it was anywhere from the top 3 to the top 28%. Math was the 4th to the 19th, and science was the 5th, bless you, to the 24th% in the state. So taking a look, we're going to move into the 5th and 6th grade information. This is specifically 5th grade, both ELA and math again. You can take a look at see what we did for 18, 19, and 2021 in ELA. Those measures are pretty close to the same. ELA did take a little bit of a dip. In math, you can see 66.4, 63.9, and then 49.4. And I'll talk a little bit more when we get to our action plans, but really when we take a look at 5th grade, knowing that when students lost some of that time in the end of 4th grade and then back and forth in the hybrid environment and making sure we're getting all the content covered in 5th grade year, there are gaps that happen. And so we've recognized that, and Dr. Murray will talk next month a little bit about our comprehensive plan and the action steps we're taking as a district. This is the 6th grade data. You'll see it looks very similar to the 5th grade data. Taking a look, we have the 83.0, 83.7, and then 79.7% in ELA. The math goes 67.8, 69.9, and then down to 49.9 during that last school year. This is a similar table. I want to just point out again, I know that sometimes when we look at bar graphs, it's a little difficult to understand or compare to what we're doing across the state. So I have that state average in that second to last column there. And then the comparison with the plus there is the 20.6% over the state in ELA in grade 5, 22.4% over in the ELA in grade 6, 13.1% in math for grade 5, and 21.7% in grade 6 for math. And then taking a look at the bottom, you can see our rankings for 5th grade. We were in the top 12% in the state. For ELA, 5th grade math was the top 21% in the state. 6th grade was the top 7% for ELA and the top 4% in the state for 6th grade math. So the other thing we wanted to take a look at is really what were the impacts of COVID? And we looked at 7th and 8th grade trends because we could go back that number of year of data. Taking a look at the 7th grade trends. So you could see from 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, taking a look at where we were. And then when I get to the next slide, you'll be able to see, I'll have 18, 19, and 21 again. So just taking a look at those percentages. And when I looked at this slide today, we had actually taken this from one of the previous presentations you've seen. So I do have the percentages on for 16, the second column there for ELA should be 86.2, then 80.8, 83.0, and 85.1. So this is just like those other slides I had shared with you for third, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. For 18, 19, and 21, you can see where we were for ELA, pretty consistent in the 18, 19 school year. And then it dropped a little bit last year. In math, we can see 66.7, then 70%, and then down to 51.2%. And again, I just want to point out where we were as compared to the state. In the ELA area, the state average is 53.3%. We were above that by 20.9%. And then for math, the state average was 26.9, and the state comparison is 24 plus 24.3%. I want to just point out again, the rankings for our 7th grade building. For ELA, we were top 7%, and in math, in the top 4%. So although those scores did dip down, you can see a comparison across the state, we're still holding our ground. This slide is similar to the previous one. We talked about the 5-year PSSA data trend for 8th grade. So I'll give you a second to take a look, but just noticing that the data previously was pretty consistent for each of both the math, ELA, and then and including science in this particular slide. And then when we take a look at the trends from, this is 18, 19, and just the 21, you can see it looks similar to some of the other grade levels, pretty consistent, 18 and 19, and then 21 does drop off both for ELA, math, and for the science. Same slide like the previous. I just want to point out again where we are with comparison to the state. And I think it's really important to take a look, even with those math scores in the 8th grade, we can see that for ELA, we were in the top 5, and then math, it's in the top 12% of the state. And then for science, it's the ranking of the top 3% in the state. We'll move into some biology, literature, algebra 1 and biology Keystone exams. Those are end of course exams for those 3 subjects. And this is the trend data from 18, 19, and 21. Our students outperformed themselves in some of the areas in 2021, but like I mentioned, there were many fewer students overall that would have taken some of these exams. So again, that data could be a little bit changed just based on the number of students. Similar type of slide that we had on the previous, I wanted to just point out here that you can see the state average of where the students across the state performed, and that next column where it says Springford, our students outperformed by 37.3%, 32.3%, and 30.5%. And at the bottom, it's pretty exciting to see that our students ranked in the top 2% in the state for literature, the top 1% in the state in algebra 1, and the top 1% of the state for science, for the biology. I wanted to also just make sure that you are well aware, as well as our community, that we have something in Pennsylvania called the Future Ready PA Index. This was launched in 2018, really to move away from that single measure of just a data score of PSSA or Keystone. I want you to note, if you do go to this site, that it hasn't been fully updated. The dashboard is just due to the limiting factors of information and data that was able to be collected from last school year. And it is also a limiting factor because we don't have 3 years of consistent data from the state, because we had 2020 not having data, not having assessments and reporting categories. So as far as the Future Ready PA Index, it focuses on 3 main reporting categories: the state assessment measures, on-track measures, and college and career measures. And then the items that I bulleted underneath are really just the reporting measures for each of those subcategories. So if you would like, you can go to that site. I have it linked in our slides. We'll make sure we put that on our website for everyone to be able to access and understand. But those are just reporting measures that schools get to be able to understand where they rank within their school systems and then across the state. The next piece I want to talk a little bit about is our cohort data, and really just looking at what that actually means and the impacts of COVID to our students. So cohort data is really just meaning the last set of data we looked at groups of students over, grade levels of students over time. So they were different students in any given year, 3rd grade class in 2018, the 3rd grade class in 2019, and so forth. When we look at cohort data, it's the same group of students over the course of their education career, if you will. So I have data from their 2025 class, which is our current 9th grade, the 26 class, which is the current 8th grade, 2027, which is our current 7th graders, and the class of 2028, which is our current 6th graders. And the reason we have that information in those particular grade levels is we can go back to their 3rd grade year and take a look at the PSSA information. So we'll take a look here just for a quick second. So this, again, this is our class of 2025. These are our current 9th grade students. So the way the cohort data is that these are all of the students that we would have had in 3rd grade, and they're all of the same students we would have had in 4th, 5th, 6th, and then in 8th grade. So if a student moved or came in outside of that band, they would not be included in this information. On these slides, what I did for the 19 and 21 school years for your frame of reference, I wanted you to see where the state bar ranked so that you could kind of see in comparison of where we are in the comparison to the state. So taking a look pretty consistently, looking at our ELA scores, they are in that 79.9 up. They had a bump up in that one year in 6th grade, which we have seen over the trends in many years. So all around that, about 80% or so. And then for math, pretty consistent. They had a little dip down in 5th grade. Again, that's very common in the data that we've seen across the state. And then last year, there was a significant drop off in the 8th grade math scores. Taking a look at the next set, this is our current 8th graders. So we have data from them for grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, and then grade 7. Similar slide like the last set, just taking a look at those same students over time. Again, taking a look, they were around that 82 to 83% before COVID, and then dropped a little bit in the 7th grade PSSA. Taking a look at the math, again, they were around that 73 or so in 3rd and 4th grade, dropped a bit in 5th grade, and then by 7th grade, when after COVID, that number went down a little bit. This class is the class that is currently in 7th grade. So we have the data from them in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 6th grade. You can see the kind of the same trend happened. Their ELA score did pop up in that 4th grade year and went down a little bit in that 6th grade year. And math has dropped off a little bit in that 6th grade year. And then this is our current 6th grade class, the class of 2028. We have data from them from grade 3, and then again last year from grade 5. Similar patterns, we see the ELA scores dip a little bit and the math is a little more significant. The other piece of that Future Ready PA Index, they look at 2 pieces of information. And this is, they look at grade 3 on-track reading measures and grade 7. And this indicator is really just a percentage of students who demonstrate that on-track proficiency on the PSSA, and there are students that we've had to have had for the full academic year. So you can see this broken down by building. Again, this is one of those measures that if you go to that Future Ready site, they'll have there listed by school or by building if it's one of our middle level buildings, but you can see where we are. And this is reflective pretty much closely to the scores that I just showed you. The only difference is some of the scores may have been attributed to us in a full growth versus a student who may not have been with us for the entire year. And that's what this would reflect. So given all of that, I really want to focus in on where we are and what we're doing next. As you know, we have been focusing on what we are calling Springford learning, and that's really, the students are the most important piece of that at the top, and then each piece of the curriculum, the assessment, instruction, and management of that, we're really focusing on building each of those pillars, building that mindset of making sure that we're thinking about the whole child with the social emotional learning, making sure that we're working on resiliency and building cultural proficiency and equity. So thinking about that, I want to specifically just talk for a couple minutes on some action plans that we've been working on within our buildings, within our instructional coaching teams, within our teacher leader teams, making sure that we're focusing in on the supports that students need in order to continue to support and grow our students. So without doing the read aloud, I want to just make sure that you recognize that we're working in guided math groups, focusing on math RTI, looking at the data and seeing where we have maybe some gaps. We use a product called ST Math, which helps support students at their own individual levels and working through that. We've been working as much as we can with flexible grouping to meet students' needs. And then thinking about for reading, we're working on small group instruction, working through that RTI model. Obviously, with last year's impacts, we didn't have as much of a RTI model in place because of movement with students. We've been working on parent outreach, IEP supports, and the instructional support team interventions. and really looking at that assessment data. Yes, we have PSSA data and we have the Keystone data to look at, but in the classroom, we have day-to-day operational classroom data. We also use NWEA MAP, which is another assessment that we use. We have Ames Web data. So those are kind of the real-time data that we can make classroom decisions. And then we look at things at the district level. Building principals are looking at their building data, looking at student and teacher data, and then obviously our teachers are drilling down to the very individual student level data. We have been working on standards review and vertical alignment. We've been building our professional learning communities through our instructional coaches and curriculum supervisors. As you'll see tonight, we have on the agenda several people on the agenda to be approved for summer RAMs, which will be our program for K-8 for reading and math. And then we also have established the before and after school tutoring. Taking a look for that, and those are for all of our elementary buildings. And the action plans for 5, 6, and 7 are very similar to those, but focusing on targeted checks, which is a strategy that we use for data when we use data collection, making sure that we understand what our students know and then take actionable steps to help them continue to develop in the content. Each of those grade levels, we're meeting twice monthly with teachers, working through curriculum to build checkpoints for understanding, creating differentiated lessons to meet the individual needs of students. We've been focusing on ed tech competencies, really making sure that since we have devices in the hands of students, being able to use that information through like Google Forms or other type tools that we can collect information to be able to help support the student learning. And again, like I mentioned before, looking at that building level data, teacher and student level data. The coaching model is put into place for the use of interventions. And again, we'll have the summer RAMs and before and after school tutoring. 8th grade is very similar to some of those other action plans. We're making sure that we're using our NWEA data to make sure that we see where our students currently are and where we can help support them. And we will also have the summer RAMs before and also have the before and after school tutoring. And then for our 9 to 12 buildings, we're looking at creating plans at content level meetings. So our content facilitators have been addressing any curriculum gaps. They're increasing instructional practices for those students that are in need of those particular areas of maybe weakness that are showing up. And then we're evaluating our common assessment data at data meetings to monitor student data and student progress. So benchmark assessments, midterm exams, and so forth. Addressing areas of need and focus on continuing best practices at faculty meetings. We're engaging our students with the Smart Futures and Career Standards benchmark. So we've been focusing on improving that and working on targeted instruction related to Algebra 1, biology, and literature through our tutoring program. 2 more things. I just want to point out a couple of points of our pride that we have. We have a comprehensive planning team that has put together and identified action steps to move us forward. We have addressed the learning loss tutoring plan, the summer programs, and we have social, emotional, and mental health resources available to our students. And our students really were high achieving after all of that and all the things that they challenged through last year, but they really did outperform many of the other schools across the state. And though we recognize that COVID did have an impact on our students, we expect with the learning loss supports put into place, we expect our scores to be able to rebound this school year. And next fall, hopefully we'll have all of our data in a timely fashion, and we'll be able to present this to you more in our typical time in November and not so much in late March, early April, like it happened to be this year. So I want to make sure that we share that information. The last thing I have on here is really that, and I'll make sure I work with Ms. Crew to make sure our families can get to this information, but there's Keystone exam and PSSA information that'll be available. There is a Future Ready PA glossary for some of these terms, a Future Ready PA index, the actual tool that you can go and visit and view the data, whether it's for Springford or any school in Pennsylvania. And there are also some family and teacher resources available on that site as well. So I will pause there. I do have some, I don't know if I'm getting.
No, thank you very much though for that. Before I open it up to the board for questions, you know, we've talked about this at the curriculum meeting. This was hard data to look at because, you know, as the Pennsylvania Department of Education had even said, this isn't the most reliable data because normally they're pretty stable with the amount of participants. Last year, people were allowed to opt out more than just for religious purposes. And so there was a lot more opting out. So it's not as consistent data. This is reflective, though, too, of our learning loss. And as you can see, it's not just Springford, it's across the state that we're seeing these declines. I know that, you and I have had these conversations too about really the most important thing is what we're doing moving forward. Some of this we've already addressed with ESSER money, and we've put things in place already, and some of it we are continuing to learn and adapt as we go. I know we've talked about accelerated learning, that idea of not only do we need to give our students a year's worth of information this year, but we need to determine where where the gaps are, that learning loss in those gaps, and that that data collection that you're doing, that constant assessment that you have in place, using a couple of the data tools there that
NWEA map, we
thank you.
use that for grades 1 through 8 in math and 3 through 8 through reading. And then Ames Web we use for K-2 for
Great.
reading.
Thank you, because that's what's going to help with that, when we can determine exactly what those gaps are and what our students need to learn going forward. It's tough with the math, as we saw. There was some significant drops there with grades, the decreases in that 5th through 8th, and what to do to have those students ready, not just for that secondary math, but also moving forward. I know there are a lot of other things that we are doing also besides the assessing and the students, and adapting our curriculum in our teaching to meet those needs. One of the things we've talked about too is with the clubs and engaging students and getting them back into learning, and also addressing the mental health issues of our students. There's a lot, and the parent outreach to get the parents more involved. So thank you for presenting this. And I know if there, you need to keep letting us know what you need, and hopefully we can continue to watch that, we can watch that gap close for next year.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. One thing that we will be bringing to committee will be a recommendation. I know Dr. Murray has shared with you before, when we were looking at another product that we used last summer that would be for all students. And so we've done an evaluation of our current products, and we'll be bringing a recommendation to the committee next month so that we can talk about that and then bring it to the full board, if you would pull that through to the board, so that we can address, it'll address some individualized learning paths, whether students are behind. We did address mostly tonight the data of what it looked like, of where we hope our students will achieve this year, but we can recognize, obviously, we have many students that did not lose any ground and were very successful last year. And so we'll continue to stretch them with some of these products that we're talking about. So I'm looking forward to bringing that to the committee next month.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, remediation and acceleration. Great. Is there anyone at the board? Did you want to start?
Ms. Gardy, thank you for bringing this presentation to us. I know it was a lot of numbers, so thank you for putting it in a very plain talk type of way. I want to be cautious because, as you said, I don't want to extrapolate too much from this data, since it is a point in time, and since, like both you and Dr. Wright mentioned, it's not really clean data due to the participation rate. But I think there are some things that we can take away. Number one, the absolute scores were down, not just at Springford, across the state. Number two, on a relative basis, relative to the state, Springford performed well. But you did say one thing in the presentation that prompted a question in my mind, which is you mentioned that Springford was holding their ground relative to the state. And one thing that wasn't in here was to what extent on that relative basis, have we seen any noticeable widening or narrowing of the spread between Springford and the state? It may not be something you can answer right now, but I'm wondering if that is top of mind for you.
We have always looked at where we rank in the state based on, surrounding school districts, and we didn't pull that in this presentation, mostly because, again, like we mentioned, it's not really valid data if we're looking at a group of students that may be only 300, and typically it's 1,000 for that particular school. But when I said hold our ground, you can see where we were as far as that gap, and each of those previous years we were still well beyond that 20 to 30% above the state. I did not do the ranking like that by county like we've done in the past, just because of the actual rates. But you can see back on those slides when it said like the top 4%, top 1%, those are well above even some of the other areas. But I caution you again, to not say, well, we're always the top 1%, because that was very relative. There were many school districts that had very, very low participation, or near to none compared to what they would have typically had in a typical year. That's why I think it'll be so critical for us to really look at the information that we'll collect this spring into next fall to really see where we are in, can measure it to across the state.
Agreed. I'll be very interested to see that. Thank you.
Okay, so I had a couple of questions, but I had a comment first that I really think you delivered the data in multiple formats that made it very clear and concise and easy to follow. So I very much appreciated that. I had a question about, and this might be for you or Dr. Murray. So I think this was, I can't put my finger on when this time frame was exactly, but we had, I think, Mrs. Gardy, you referenced it. We had a discussion about the RAMS program. You remember expanding that to use that tool all the time, and then the iReady, yes, the iReady. And then we pulled it back. And there was going to be an inventory of the products that you have. And Mrs. Gardy, you referenced that. So that inventory has been completed, and will there be that this new program would then either complement or replace some of what we have out there, correct?
That is correct. So next month, when we meet on the 11th at committee, I plan to share that with the committee members so that they can see the item that we're wanting to purchase and put in place. And then there are a couple items that we'll remove because it'll kind of be, if we bought both, then it would be double.
Right,
Two things for
yeah.
math in third grade wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, and we had talked about that a little bit, but we were also looking to see like what dates they would fall off or they would expire so that the timing would be right. So it sounds like you're on that right track, which would then provide the differentiation for the students and provide that individualized instruction that they need to help, meet them where they are and move them forward. But the RAMS program, the summer program itself, that's still based on the iReady, correct? No.
No, our hope is to be able to use a new program, but the summer RAMs will be based on student needs regardless of what that program is. So I know that Katie has been working on that piece. So whatever program this is that we're going to be getting will complement the summer RAMs, but we're trying to create the programs so that it's not dependent on a product.
Okay, wonderful idea. Have you started, I know that there are many items on the agenda tonight too for approval. And we talked about some of that last week. Have you started recruitment of the students for that summer program?
So I've been working with our principals to really work through and identify. And so that in the next 2 weeks or so, we'd like to be able to make sure that before spring break, the first round of families would be invited to the program, because again, we're using student data to make sure that we're really targeting the students that need the most help. And then once those spots will be filled, any remaining spots will be open to our community for other families that weren't initially invited. So that has been working through. It's just based on schedules. We'll finish that out probably early next week. And then that after that, we'll have information shared with families.
I just was mentioning that because I know last year it was like a mad dash race, right? So we don't want it to sneak up on us. We want to make sure that we get it out there, but it sounds like you're on top of that as well. So then my last piece was, yes, I think we can, many of us that understand this data as you presented it are also to understand that it's probably not very reliable or valid. Nonetheless, it's still will be at least considered for our rankings. So, and you did reference that after Mrs. Herman's just spoke too. Is your expectation that the rankings will stay relatively the same since you reported Springford in relation to the other districts in our state? And we were able to see that Springford is still significantly, the percentages in most cases were still significantly higher. So is your expectation that our rankings will remain relatively unchanged, at least for this year?
I believe so, except for that PD has really asked us not to rank, and I don't know what information they will share similarly like they've done in the past, because it was sort of a I don't want to say a warning, but a warning, like, don't look at this information the same way you would have in the past. So when we look at some of like Newsweek and rankings like that, those are more on those other like AP exams and SAT and some of those types of rankings, attendance and those types of areas. So I'm not sure that PDE will actually put anything out and say, this is where you landed. We did this internally with the data files that we were able to accomplish and go through and take a look at everything. It's a little bit different than what they've done in the past, but we were able to do that as a comparison. But when we looked at the data, there were, again, schools that might have 2,000 students in a certain grade level band, and they had several hundred in there instead. So again, I just want to be really cautious about looking at anything. I think what is really telling, though, is that double-digit over the state average gain, none of our areas were below that. And so I think that's really, I mean, I would expect that, but at the same time, it's really great to see that our students are continuing to outperform by those double-digit returns. So I think that shows me, again, I think Mrs. Herman said it, like the return that we have is in comparison to who actually did take the exam, and we did outperform other schools based on that information.
So with that in mind, and with, as I said, the format for how you basically presented it in different ways, could I just ask that we see something similar next year with the new data added in the fall? It would be then crystal clear to say, hey, did we naturally rebound? Did we rebound because of the different programs that were put in place? What can that be attributed to? Or I mean, first and foremost, we want to see the rebound, right? So I would just respectfully ask that you do something similar in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I would expect to do a similar, just because, again, comparing apples to apples. The other piece we did talk about and we didn't include tonight were things like the AP exam results and SAT scores, again, for the purpose of this presentation and the data that was available. But next school year, it would be more, quote, traditional as far as the items. So we'll have a little bit more comprehensive piece in there as well. Thank you.
And to clarify, that this is being done at this time because the Keystone and PSSA data was not available when it normally would be, because the state extended the deadline for schools to submit. So that's why we're kind of off with this now. Anyone else at the table?
I just had a comment. I know, thank you so much for your presentation. And, it's very important to have a benchmark to see, whether it's the best data. It's good that we have something to kind of base the past couple years off of. But something that I wanted to speak to, I guess, and I know your presentation is on these results, but something that impacts the results was like a little piece in the slide that you presented with the different pillars of your model, which kind of talks about the social and emotional learning piece, because I think it kind of brings it back to giving school breakfast. So if you can't learn if your belly's not full. So if either in curriculum or at some point, just kind of, because I know there was 2 years of a lot of flexibility with curriculum, with, assignments being handed in and from the state, and, just we're trying to get through the past 2 years. So I think as we make that shift, it is an adjustment for the students where there's a little bit more accountability that could weigh on them. So I just would be interested, maybe in curriculum or at some point, to hear a little bit about, do we feel like those students feel supported in those ways as they make that adjustment back to normal? Thank you so much.
Right. Anyone else at the board table have comment? All right. Thank you very much. We move on to our next presentation, which is Dr. Tina Giambattista, the Assistant Superintendent of Special Education and Student Services, and Mrs. Elizabeth Lease, Director of Human Resources, to present on Springford's pathways to teaching by promoting growth from within. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to provide you with a brief presentation, and I will stress brief. I know a lot of data has been thrown at you in the last 20 minutes, so we will try to keep your attention as we share some project and opportunities in this presentation. So before I begin, Mrs. Lees and myself have been working together to address the critical shortage of teaching in the district. We know we have a lot of information just from Pennsylvania and nationwide. In fact, before I go too far into the agenda, it would be important for you to know some statistical data. So in the year 2000, since the year 2010, there's been a 66% drop in teachers acquiring their certification 1 over the last 10 years. More importantly, the number of retirements are outnumbering the number of teachers that we're hiring. So we don't have any sustainability. And lastly, and equally as important, teachers aren't staying in education for more than 5 years. There's statistical evidence that's showing 45% of teachers are leaving the field of education within the first 5 years. So we thought that we would work together to try and use our forward thinking and address a couple of issues that we see here in the district and potentially provide some opportunities for our own staff and provide them with pathways to careers here in Springford. So the agenda, let's look this way. I'm going to briefly go through some of the trends and teaching facts, the timelines and the PA regs, because there are some reasons why you'll see the major drops in the years that were during the 2010 and 2014 year. Some forward-thinking ideas, share some survey data, and next steps in action planning. So I went over 1 or 2 facts that I had pulled from PDE. Here's a number of other teaching shortages facts. In 2018, only 4% of college freshmen entered education as a major, compared to 11% in the year 2000. From 2010 to 2013, the number of students in Pennsylvania teacher education programs also dropped by 31%, which is significant. The number of active teachers during that same time frame did not seek new certifications. The retention of new teachers continues to be a major drain, 45% of them leaving within 5 years. And coming up in one of the more critical areas, special education, very difficult role to fill, is always and has been even more difficult to fill because of the additional certification requirements that were put in place years ago. So Mrs. Lees is going to go through some of those timelines, and you'll see some of the reasons why those drops were so significant.
Thank you. So if you go back to the days of No Child Left Behind and highly qualified status, that was the beginning of some of the issues that we began facing. Special education teachers had to become highly qualified in the content areas that they taught in. So if you were a special education teacher and you were teaching social studies content, at that time you would have to get certified in social studies or be housed or bridged in those content areas. It was a big process that we all had to go through many years ago. In addition, PDE also made some changes to their areas of certification. Special ed was one that was highly affected. So back in the day, you could get an N through 12 certification for special education, meaning that you could teach any grade level for special education. If I had my cert, I could go in and teach special education in a kindergarten setting, or I could go up to the high school area. What they did is they actually took that certification and they broke it into 2. So that they created the pre-K through 8 and then the 7 through 12 certs. What that in fact did is drove all of those individuals who were interested in special education down to the pre-K through 8. So we have a heavy concentration, heavy being the operative word because it's still really a light number, but that's where majority of our special education certified individuals coming out of college are. We have very few right now at the secondary level. Just for some numbers, just so you have an understanding, in the 2012-2013 school year, with the pre-K through 12 cert, we had approximately 3,100 students graduating, getting their instructional one pre-K through 12 certification. In 2013-14, when they made the split, you had about 1,400 students getting their pre-K through 8 cert and 122 7 through 12. So this problem has been ongoing. It's been perpetuated. Not only did you have to get that split cert, but then you also had to be highly qualified and get that other content area. So if I'm a 7 through 12 teacher, not only do I need my special ed cert, I also need that content area. For the elementary, again, very similar, but the content areas were not so split apart, right? You have your elementary pre-K through 4 or your 4 through 8 certifications. It wasn't split apart as much. So this had a huge impact on the number of students graduating with those areas of certification, which is why we're seeing that huge decline and the difficulty that we're finding getting special education teachers, particularly at the 7th grade level or at the secondary level. So this is a real quick graph, just so you can see the declining trends of instructional ones issued by PDE over the course of the past 10 years. So the line, the dark blue line that's all the way on the left of each grouping is just those areas of certification issued in Pennsylvania, right? Then the lighter blue line next to it is your out-of-state people coming in, getting certified. The next line over are your add-on certificates. So there are certain areas that you can test for and have added on to your teaching certificate. And then the light blue line is the total number of certificates issued by Pennsylvania. So again, you can see that trend going down. And on this, you can just see the numbers in front of you. You can see the significant decrease in areas of certification or in certifications, especially the level ones. 21,000 being issued 10 years ago, we're down to 6,900 in the 1920 school year. This chart is very reflective also of the level 2 certifications. They almost mirror one another. So, well, this is almost like a 66, 67% decrease. For level 2 areas of certification, it's about a 50%, 57% decrease of the certs being issued. Special education, as I spoke about, was particularly hard hit. You can see the results of splitting that certificate into the 2 areas. As of January 1st, 2022, this year, PDE is now once again issuing the pre-K through 12 certificate, giving school districts much more flexibility in our staffing options. They also eliminated the highly qualified piece rate that would require somebody to get a content area certification as well. So that we're hoping that provides some relief moving forward.
And if I'm not mistaken, that under the new K to 12 certification, those who are certified in secondary and or elementary can apply for the latter of the 2. So if you're secondary content and you want to apply for your K to 12 cert, you're able to do that as well. So as a result of the Act 82, legislation was passed to combat the future shortages. Just as Ms. Lees was describing before, there were 2 different certifications. Now that has been remerged back to 1. And under the new law, special ed teachers can apply for their certs as effective December 31st, 2021. And that'll be pre-K to 12. Teachers with pre-K to 12 to grade 8 or grade 7 certs will be able to expand to include all grade levels if they aren't currently certified. Okay, so what do we do? These are the things that Mrs. Lisa and I have been talking about moving forward and how to promote pathways in-house and address this need that we have.
So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on the first two, but I do want to touch on them just so you can see that not only are we focusing on building pipelines from within with our own staff, but continuing outreach at job fairs, taking the time to build relationships with the colleges and universities. We are participating in mock interviews with colleges and universities. We're meeting with students on campus to help them prepare for interviews, to review resumes and things along those lines, getting our name and our face out there as often and as much as we can. Additionally, we're also expanding our student teaching opportunities here at Springford. We have reached out more than ever. We have a large number of colleges that we are working with currently to attract student teachers to come onto our campus to do their student teaching experience. We have found that we've had the opportunity to get some really good student teachers that we've been able to hire as well. They're familiar with us. We get the chance to see them in action a little bit, and it works really well. Currently for the spring semester, we have about 25 student teachers throughout the district and about 16 field observations going on. So the field observations are what occurs the semester prior to the student teaching. We have teachers who are more than willing to serve as cooperating teachers for the students from the colleges and universities. So we are excited to continue that and to expand on that as well.
So, and I will expand on the last, creating opportunities for current employees to advance their degrees. So we wanted to take a look at our instructional assistants. We have about 155. So we determined that in order for us to kind of get a pulse on where we are, we need to see if there's any interest. So we surveyed, we sent a survey out to all the instructional assistants. We had 86 respondents. Of the 86, you can see that the area of yellow and the area of green where their level of education were, we have more than half of our current instructional assistants have bachelor's degrees and or bachelor's plus certifications. On the bottom, I only took two of the most important pies from the survey data. We wanted to gain their interest. So we combine, when you combine both the very interested and the interested, we came out to about 51 instructional assistants who are very interested in pursuing their bachelor's degree with certification. If we have some provisions for them, or if there's some pathways that may potentially help them to get there. Here's a breakdown of the candidates who were very interested. As you can see, we have two who are they're highly qualified status, 9 already have associate's degrees, 24 have bachelor's, and 16 have bachelor's with certifications. So you can see that their path
into some of those things. There are a lot of options and opportunities for us to grow from within. Over the past 4 or 5 years, we have hired a handful of our instructional assistants who have gone on to be very successful teachers in the classroom, and we'd like to encourage our instructional assistants to continue to do that.
Yes, and one of the last and most recent potential pathway was a bill that's on the floor. It's House Bill 2206, which Dr. Wright shared with me earlier in the week. And it's a potential Grow Your Own Educators Program grant. Hasn't been approved yet, but that is something that is being addressed statewide. So we're hoping that if that's passed, we'll be able to utilize or appropriate some of that funding to any of these interested candidates who will move on and pursue their degree. That's it. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much for that. And I appreciate, I know you put a lot of effort into coming up with an initiative in order to kind of be proactive and look towards what we can do to increase our special ed teaching population. So I appreciate that. So any questions from the board? The table?
I have a question, a couple of questions.
Wendy first.
A couple of things. Are there any surveys being taken of the teachers that leave? You're saying they're leaving after 5 years. Do we have any information on why they've left? Are they disgruntled with the administration or the processes or the salaries or what is that? I mean, I haven't seen any statistics on that. And the other thing is, we're taking steps to try to attract people, but what is deterring students from going into the field of education? And I believe that probably the majority of teachers are women, and so your statistics go back and compare it to 2000 versus now. There are a lot more opportunities for women in the field, in many fields. I mean, maybe somebody that was great at math and used to be a math teacher, now maybe she wants to go into technology. And I'm not just saying it's just women, but I just wonder what kind of research is being done on the why people aren't going into teaching and why are they leaving, other than just trying to attract them. And, certainly the salaries have gone up and those sort of things, and there's lots of rewards to attract them. But why are they leaving and why aren't they going into it in the first place?
Well, it's not just a Springford issue. I think it isn't a national issue. I do know that when teachers are leaving, they are surveyed through HR, and I don't necessarily attribute it to one reason or another. We did not survey our teachers, at least we don't have that information. The information from the state didn't disaggregate out reasons why. We were having a conversation earlier about a lot of, because teachers' profession is customer oriented. There are a lot of jobs out there that are more lucrative and you don't need to take a praxis exam in various content levels to pass in order to get a high paying salary job. So special ed has always been difficult to, at least in my experience, hire, because it is a very specified area, and unless you have specific skills in areas under IDEA, autism, specific learning disability, you have to have a very avid and attractive package in order to retain teachers and have them want to come back to the district to continue teaching. There's a stress level as well. And let's be honest, over the past 2 years, the pandemic has not helped the SEL of both students and teachers. So I don't have any definitive data for you, but I just know from what I hear and what I read, there's some of the reasons why I think
students in college are deferring from entering it into education and going into another field.
Additionally, the recession that happened about 10 years ago or so didn't help very much either. Education has always been seen as an area where jobs were a little bit more protected. And then all of a sudden there were a lot of layoffs, there was a lot of furloughs, and that fear and uncertainty that was happening in private industry fell into the laps of school districts as well. And we had to go through laying off staff. And it was a very painful process for school districts. And what it did is it embedded a fear now of people of going into education as well. So that's where we really started to see the big decline in the numbers of people entering into education. And to Dr. G's point, people who come into education often don't understand what they're getting into. They go through the college program, they go through student teaching, but it's until you live it and breathe it and are dealing with it that you truly understand the amount of work that goes with it. And I truly think that some people don't understand that when they first get into it. Their hearts might be in the right places, but when the reality of the job hits them, it's easier to go to other jobs. There was recently an article in SHRM magazine about how employers are now looking to attract and hire teachers, because teachers have a very good skill set in customer service, in training, in things along those lines. So even some of our teachers that might be leaving or retired are now finding opportunities in the outside sector as well.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer?
Thank you. I just have I guess more of a procedural question. When I read this, the presentation, Pathways to Teaching by Promoting Growth from Within, is this sort of an update on what we're doing because to me, that's a recruitment strategy, right? I mean, it's promoting from within. So is this to update the board and the public just on that? Is that the whole purpose? That's question A. And I saw some heads nodding, so yes.
This is, it's an initiative, sometimes something that they've.
Yeah, and this is wonderful. That's great. And thank you for being up there. I guess to me, and Mrs. Lees, you're fully aware, this is a subject that I'm quite passionate about, right? So, and have been for some time, recognizing that 45% of teachers leaving is sort of the national average. Do we have a retention issue here? And that's something that I've been watching as a board member, our retirements and resignations at an alarming rate, but I'm not living it. So I'm just curious if part of this presentation is to sort of notify us that we do have a retention issue, because retention and recruitment are two different things, right?
Correct.
One's filling the bucket, one's plugging the hole in the bucket. So I'm just curious if we're at that spot.
Sure. So we are seeing a lot of retirements. You are correct. We do have teachers of retirement age. We also have teachers who are taking opportunities either in other districts within the state or even moving out of state to take other job opportunities for themselves or their spouses. I have mentioned before, I meet with all staff if they wish to do so during an exit interview. So I do hear the reasons that they are leaving. And a lot of them have spent almost their entire career here at Springford. We do have the occasional individual who comes on to Springford and realizes that maybe after a couple of years, it wasn't exactly what they had hoped for. That doesn't happen often. When we get teachers, we tend to keep them unless, like I said, unless they get an opportunity elsewhere, if somebody is moving, something along those lines, or if they're seeking an opportunity that just isn't available here at Springford, but might be available in another school district. We are seeing the uptick in people retiring perhaps a little bit earlier than they would, just due to the pandemic, being burnout, being tired, having those opportunities available that they can retire a little bit earlier if they wish to do so. But I think here at Springford, we are blessed with an excellent professional staff, and they're here, they're 100%, and we're not seeing retention issues at this point in time. So this is not a precursor to another presentation for you.
Thank you. Mrs. Harmons?
Thank you. So the question around, you referenced the current policy and the $2,500. I'm curious, given that you've already acknowledged that, you know, supply is low, demand is high, and that there is, and, you know, whether it be just here or even more broadly, staffing shortages. You know, I know that your next step is to explore tuition reimbursement plans specific to this, but I'm curious, did you have anything in the current policy, or is it something that maybe you're considering as you explore the current, you know, explore further, any type of like time and job or lock-in? Because like right now I'm thinking like we have all these people, 60% that are saying very interested. I would be concerned in terms of putting money forward to get them upskilled in these degrees and then ultimately leaving Springford. So how is that addressed?
Sure, and I'd be happy to speak to that. What we would look to do is to build language in to protect from happening. Currently in our collective bargaining unit, we do have language that I would probably look to mimic, which indicates that if you go for certification for your first, I think it's like 12 credits towards level 2 certification, that if you leave within 3 years, you would owe 100% of the tuition reimbursement back. And then it would be scaled down after 6 years, you wouldn't owe anything back. So there is language that we could put into the plan to prevent that from happening, where we're training and then people are moving on to other districts.
Mrs. Zasowski.
So first, thank you both for putting this together. I know that Mrs. Lees, you had brought this to personnel back in February. That was one of the questions that had come up. Well, what kind of commitment would we be looking for in terms of tuition reimbursement? But honestly, we thought that it was appropriate for the full board and the community to hear about this endeavor, because it is very assertive, and it is, we're going to grow who we have here. We want to help who we have here, help them and help us, right, at the same time. So it's a positive, it's a win-win on both sides. I think you really outlined the basis for it and the plan to do it very well in the presentation tonight. I really have to just remark, because I don't know that we touched on this so much when we talked, but when you were going over the history of this and you talked about the pre-K through 12, the damage has been done, right? And I'm glad to see that they recognize that maybe that wasn't the best plan, because I really think that if somebody had the opportunity, maybe they thought they wanted to work in elementary, but they went into secondary because there was an opening there in the district that they wanted to be in, they might have found that they loved it. They might have found that that was their niche. And maybe unfortunately that we've lost some of that. But hopefully these steps are going to help that to rebound a little bit. Does anybody that's say in elementary now, is there any, I know you said that they can move to the other spot. Will there be any additional requirements put on them to make that move? Do you know? By the state?
So in Act 82 that was announced back in 2019, there was an opportunity for individuals who had that pre-K through 8 to test up and also test back down. So some of those requirements were that they had to contact a state-approved program provider to complete additional competencies for the opposite special ed grade scope. So if I was pre-K through 8, I'd have to test through the 7 through 12. I would have to apply in TIMS, which is the Teacher Information Management System, with approved providers' recommendations. So somebody would have to recommend me for that. There would not be any additional testing, and there wouldn't need to be a prerequisite. So that was one way you could do it, or you could obtain a passing score on the opposite certification test. So you could either test, or you could contact a provider and go through coursework. So those were your opportunities. Not a whole lot of people took advantage of them simply because they had already determined the path that they were going to take when they first went in.
So would they have to do that at this point?
Sure. So anybody who's finishing up college and is getting a certificate at this point after January 1st, 2022, will be getting that pre-K through 12 certificate. So that split is no longer occurring. Anybody who graduated prior to that, they would have to do one of these two things in order to get that full scope of the certificate.
I just wanted to make sure I understood. So they do have to take an extra step and do one of two items.
Correct.
But we could help them get to that point.
And we do have some individuals who are working as instructional assistants right now who are certified in other instructional areas, maybe elementary or something along those lines. Their path is going to be much shorter to get certified in special education than somebody with a bachelor's degree in business or something like that.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you both.
Anyone else at the table? Comment? No. Thank you very much for the presentation. We look forward to hearing more about it. I know I was really impressed by the number of our the respondents that were interested in this, and having worked with many of our support staff in the district, they would be wonderful with this opportunity. So thank you. Okay. So if there's no other comments, we'll be moving on to the board and committee reports. And the first one we have is the community relations. This is Zasowski.
Okay, so Community Relations Committee met back on Tuesday, March 1st. We are on a bi-monthly rotation with extracurricular, so it was a little bit ago. I do want to share with you that you'll see, I believe it's on the agenda tonight for a vote, and that would be the Chester County Intermediate Unit Communications Audit. The committee recommended that we do move that forward. And just as a side note, the MCIU doesn't offer this, the CCIU does. So that would be why it's falling there. The Springford Booster Club RAM project, we had conversation about that as well in the committee meeting. And as we know that the Booster Club there was a presentation at the last meeting on that project with an update on that project. As of I think last week's meeting and as when we met here, 2 RAMs have already been sold and others are in process. And then there is that one also. Okay. And then also we have the Pssa submissions. So the Community Relations Department, the Communications Department had submitted 13 projects regarding excellence in education communications. It's a contest that goes on every year, and each year it seems that Springford is submitting more and more. There were 13 submissions, and they were all related to graphic design, publications, videos. Ms. Crew had some of those, and Mr. Rothermel had others. I am happy to give a little update because I don't want to let too much time go by, but 8 out of 13 did receive awards, which is very notable, very commendable. And I congratulate both Ms. Crew and Mr. Rothermel on that accomplishment. Also in that meeting, we discussed some new business. Mr. Rothermel is doing an RCTV Alumni Spotlight series. He is launching that new series and whereby he will showcase Springford alumni that are doing something in this world to make a difference. So we'll look forward to seeing that. There was also some comment about asking our communications department, our marketing department to reach out to the tech school to share some resources that RCTV has already created for our own use, just to share those to give some kind of a framework for Western Center to possibly emulate or model their own communications after the success that our district has had. And then there was also some conversation about assisting SNAP with a grant that Ms. Crew has already been in contact with the SNAP people and will continue to work with them to try to get that grant to help with the SNAP programming. So that was our meeting, and we will meet again the first Tuesday in May, at which point there will be a lot of discussion about the end of year activities, and we'll look forward to that. Does anyone have any questions or comments about that meeting? Okay, then I guess I'll move right on to personnel. Is that okay with you? Yes. Okay, so personnel, and I referenced this earlier when Mrs. Lees and Dr. Giambattista were up there, that we did meet in February, and we met with the 4 different groups that were slated for benefit summaries this year. We then brought back to the board the requests and went back to the groups just recently on March 22nd, doing our best to accommodate those requests that we could. And so we have wrapped that up for this year, is my understanding. Mrs. Lees will finish with them with the benefit summary agreements and move forward. And we'll be meeting with the next round next year. So that about closes it out for personnel at this point.
Questions on personnel? Okay, moving on to the legislative committee. That would be Mrs. Deardorff.
We did not have a meeting this month, but I do get updates from the MCIU, and there's actually a few items on here that we've kind of already talked about tonight. But on the federal level, the child nutrition waivers are ending, which is of concern or of importance because on March 15th, President Biden signed into law a new Consolidated Appropriations Act, which is providing funding for federal government through September 30th of 2022. And that's a $1.5 trillion spending plan, which extends a lot of federal programs, but left out of that was the extension of the child nutrition waivers that gives schools the flexibility in preparing and distributing food to students. So during the pandemic, we did see a lot of federal support regarding the nutrition waivers. So I guess there is legislation hoping that they can get added to that because they are set to expire on June 30th. And the House and the Senate have been in recess to facilitate the respective Appropriations Committee hearings on the 2022-2023 budget, but the House was scheduled to return to session on March 21st and then canceled in order to give home districts time to gather election petition signatures after their redistricting. So both the House and Senate will return on March 28th. Specifically to us, cyber charter schools, on March 22nd, the House Education Committee held a hearing on the cyber charter school application and renewal process. There's some House bills going through that would hopefully allow PDE to improve accountability within the cyber charter sector to better manage student growth in schools exhibiting significant academic and other challenges, and how charter renewals are issued. Also on March 21st, some charter regulations, independent review was held. And the charter school community was clearly in opposition to changes that PDE was requesting. So there's a lot of next steps going on. There's a waiting period for these committees to clarify the state charter law school reform. There's a whole bunch of different topics, like bullet points under there. I can, like I said, I'll always forward this to anybody that wants it, but I won't, just read this whole thing to you. But what I did want to note was the teacher shortages. So this is something on the state level that is being discussed too. On March 15th, the House Education Committee held a public hearing about teacher shortages. And this is gonna kind of be some duplicate information that we already received in the presentation, but since 2010, we've seen a 66% decline in that level 1 teaching certificates. And so it talks about what Dr. G and Ms. Lees spoke about, how we're trying to increase the, make it more easier for our current staff to obtain these certifications. And then regarding the school funding lawsuit on March 10th, after 4 months and 40 witnesses, the school funding lawsuit concluded with closing arguments before the Commonwealth Court. Post-trial briefs will be filed this spring and summer, and then we will get a decision for next steps. So that is more than you all probably hoped for regarding legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about that? Do we know when the voucher for the food program, the food voucher will end? Is it going to continue through the summer like we did this past summer?
They're set to expire on June 30th.
Thank you. All right. MCIU, we did meet on Wednesday, but I will have my report at our next meeting. We did talk a little bit about shortages, staff shortages, and was bulk of it too. But PSBA liaison, Mr. Schaefer, anything?
No report this evening.
Mrs. Sullivan is not with us here tonight regarding the American Legion. Assistant Superintendent's report for Dr. Murray or
Good evening. As you know, this evening, you'll find a large number of curricular resources up for approval. I'd like to take a moment to recognize and appreciate the hard work of all of our teams for their review and recommendations of new resources. Their thorough review of the curriculum has led to the recommendations that you see this evening. For those who are new to this process, during a curriculum review, our curriculum supervisors and/or director works with teams of teachers to evaluate the curriculum needs and make recommendations for updates. I would also like to recognize the leadership of our Director of Curriculum, Katie Gardy, who reviewed a major content area, which is an extensive process and it requires a lot of collaboration. So many of the resources you'll see for approval tonight are 7 to 12, 12th grade English and reading. And she used the district literacy plan to guide the work. And English teachers and Katie Gardy are really excited to be bringing forward several updates for approval this evening. Mrs. Zazowski kind of stole my thunder a bit with the Pssa recognition. So I won't discuss that any further, but I do want to extend a congratulations to the communication, marketing, and media department, including Aaron Crew, Andrew Rothermel, Brandon Bartola, and Rich Pravetti for their accomplishments and 8 awards. In addition, the Springford String Jamboree will be held this Thursday for all current 4th through 12th grade string musicians. This is a free event open to the public and will also be live streamed on RCTV. Also, the Springford SNAP program needs your help. Post-prom is back and SNAP needs all of the community support for this event. Regardless of the grade level of students, please consider helping to make a post-prom a huge success for our seniors. This event will be held May 14th at Arnold's Family Fun Center. Volunteers will be needed, starting with the community walkthrough. You can visit sfsnap.org for more information. And my final update is regarding the Springford Educational Foundation. Since 1993, the Springford Educational Foundation has been working to secure charitable resources to support and enrich Springford Area School District's educational programs, as well as raise funds to help provide scholarships for deserving Springford graduates. This nonprofit organization is dedicated to making positive contributions to the district and is helping to ensure students can receive a solid, well-rounded education. Currently, they are seeking additional members, and if you are interested in learning or joining the Springford Educational Foundation, please reach out to them. At this time, I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Giambattista for her report.
Thank you. Very briefly, in the area of student services, there were several district psychologists representing all grade levels. They recently attended a cost-free virtual training through Pssa on integrating multi-tier systems of support to better serve the unique needs, academic needs of all students. Those who attended then shared out with their colleagues to the entire psychology department, and they're looking forward to working with their building teams to improve reading and math interventions for all of our Springford students. In the area of school counseling, at both the middle school and high school level, they're deeply involved in the course selection process, many of which are meeting one-to-one with students and working together with families on course selection. The Future Planning Center has been hosting presentations on different careers with guest presenters, and some of them are Springford grads. The College and Career Fair was held last week. And finally, the Western Tech Center, the 8th grade students went and visited, and 25 to 30 current 8th graders are planning to enroll at the tech for 9th grade. In the area of special education, CPAC, the meeting is Thursday at the 9th grade center auditorium, and the speakers will be from Pssa, and they will be speaking on post-secondary options for students. And finally, a group of our special education students from the high school, along with their RAM buddies, recently had a community-based outing, which they went to a painting workshop, and it was a fantastic experience for all. Students got to take home their paintings, and their RAM buddies helped them through the work. And that's it.
And I just want to tag on to that. We've gotten into the tradition of announcing our retirees. We have 3 on the agenda for this evening, and we have Peter Kowalczyk, senior high custodian with 23 years of service here at Springford. Dominic Morello, also senior high custodian with 22 years. of service. Also, he was a substitute custodian for 7 months prior to his hire. And then Dr. Michael Sigans, 20 years within the district. He was hired in 2002 as a middle school assistant principal for grades 7 and 8. He became the acting 8th grade principal for the 04-05 school year. And in 2007, he was named the principal of the 8th grade center where he was until this year. All combined, those 3 people, 65 plus years of service here at Springford. So we thank them for their time and wish them well on that next venture.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions or comments?
So I just want to comment on the college and career fair. It was very well attended. I was there that night. It was very well attended. Thank you, Ms. Crew, for taking my picture, which I didn't love. But it was well attended, and I was really happy to see there was a vast array of different colleges and universities there. Many of them that do grow teachers also, and I know that there were conversations being had about supporting that and growing that education programming, the education piece. So that was good. What I love to see too is that there were a few, I guess, extra that were added on even later, and they didn't turn them away. Our FPC didn't turn them. They made a space for them. It was full. It was great, and I think it was really something neat for this class too, because there have been a lot of classes, well, several classes recently that unfortunately, because of COVID, they didn't even get out to see people face to face. They didn't get out to the schools. I'm starting to hear a lot of chatter about people that are changing direction. They've been at schools now that they didn't see, and they're coming back. So I think it's great to have that touch. And I thought that was very successful in person, super well attended. Thank you so much to you for doing that and the FPC, because that was just a great night. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, solicitors report. Mr. Mark Fitzgerald.
Good evening. Just briefly, there was a communication from the U.S. Department of Education that came over the wire on, I think, Thursday or Friday from Secretary Cardona, which I find instructive as it relates to, as districts are starting to reduce requirements within their health and safety plans regarding COVID, a reminder surrounding obligations under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, as well as the IDEA. It's a good read in part because it also informs both educators and parents. It was a Dear Educator and Parent letter that for purposes of 504 identification and even IDEA supports and services, conditions surrounding long COVID can be an identifiable disability. Certainly, it's more of a granularly kind of approach now on the individual student level than on the health and safety plan level, but certainly compliance with the letter is suggested. In addition, later this week, my office, myself and my partner, Kelly Hodge, will be meeting with the administrators of the district to review student and employee investigations, essentially a review of compliance with policy, compliance with our MOU with local law enforcement, and kind of the intersection of internal investigations, outside criminal investigations, and how to comply with all in between. It's usually a good opportunity for everybody to share notes and to ensure compliance with best practices moving forward. So we'll keep you up to date on that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Then we'll move on to the approval of the agenda for the minutes A and B. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So approved. Moving on to personnel. Personnel, we have A through W. Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Item V. V as in Victor. Is there any particular reason why we are holding 2 spots for a club that's not listed?
Feeling like I need to answer that one. Mr. Rizzo, there was a good reason for that, but I can't.
There are some clubs that are still in the pipeline that just haven't gone through their process of being acknowledged as a club. And I think those are placeholders for those. If I'm not mistaken, Dr. Giambattista was at the most recent meeting. She might be able to opine a little further.
Yes, there's 3 clubs that are currently in process. They're going through the process, but they haven't completed it just yet. That's why the placeholders are still there.
And just further on that process means they've been formed. They're just going through sort of like the check marks to become an official. So in some regards, it'd be good to sort of have an acknowledgement for the faculty member that there is a position for them before we recruit, right? So that's sort of a little bit of a chicken and the egg there, but that was.
And item W, I can appreciate Mr. Rogers' enthusiasm for taking this position on behalf of the district, but I can't support it at an additional $2,000 a month.
I don't think it is 2,000 a month. It's 1,000 a month. It's 2,000 altogether.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, Ms. Earl.
Would you like that one separated?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll separate W. Any other questions or comments?
That was 2.
All right, so we are going to, we're looking for a motion for personnel A through, say A through V. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
This is personnel.
Right.
I thought you already took.
Well, I did. I'm sorry. I did take the motion for that, but we separated out W.
So A through
I'm
V.
good. All right, A through V only. So all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
No,
Through A through V, you're opposed?
so we're at W.
No, we're not. We're A through V. So all in favor, including Mr. Jackson. Thank you. Now looking at under personnel W, which we've separated out. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And second, questions and additional questions or comments?
Since it was brought up, just refresh my memory, Mr. Rizzo, with regards to how you arrived at the 2,000.
As per the Act 93 agreement, there's a stepwise structure, steps, I think it's 10 through 16, and moving from secondary house principal to a building principal, there's a difference in pay. I prorated that based on where Mr. Rogers would fall if he were a hired full-time principal as compared to where he is right now with his current salary. And I prorated that difference based on 2 months or 1/6 of a school year.
Thank you.
And hopefully this doesn't set a precedence for other positions within the district when someone's asked to step up to carry a load for an X amount of time. That's what my concern is. If we do it for one, will we do it for everybody else where the situation is similar?
Well, why wouldn't we? What if someone is taking on more responsibility? Why would you not give them some additional salary to make up for that? I don't understand what the objection to that is.
It's my objections, Ms. Earl, based on my concern that we're opening up Pandora's box by doing this.
Isn't it already open? I mean, don't we always do that? If you're promoting somebody in their responsibilities, are you not promoting them in their salary?
I am not aware that this is an action that's done across the district.
I don't understand.
I've only been here for 3 years, but in the time that I've been here and in my conversation with Ms. Lees, anytime we promote somebody from acting to, for a temporary period, promote them from where they are to an acting role, there's usually an increase in, a prorated increase in their salary for that time period. I don't know how many times that happened prior to me being here, but that seems to be the industry standard.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Rizzo, that was the case for you also.
That is correct.
All right, any other questions or comments from the board? All those in favor, then say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The motion passes. Moving on to finance. Before we begin finance, there is a correction to D22, which is on the bottom of page 9. On the second to the bottom line with the ESY extended school year, it says 2021. That should be 2022. It's for this school year. So we are looking at finance A through E. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Questions or comments?
Can we separate D20?
Separating D20.
Question.
Yes.
Sorry. On home and school associations that have outside contracts, those contracts are not reviewed by our solicitor. So why is the district being asked to approve an outside contract? I forgot this question last week.
That's a good question. That's been our practice here. I don't know why we do that. We do have an agreement that is reviewed by, at times we have Mr. Fink review it, but it is a standard agreement that we have with our, with anybody that comes in and does assemblies. But I don't know why.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Well, it may depend on if the money comes to us and then we're dispersing the money. But if it's a arm's length deal between, say, the Home and School Association and a third party, then we really should not be involved in that. That would not be our prerogative. So it ultimately depends on whether that money has been given to us and then we're ultimately engaging the vendor or not. But yes, if we're really not involved, we shouldn't be approving it. It's not our oversight.
All right, so is this
Is there a specific example that we need to explore here?
Well, I'm just looking at what's listed here. If I look at item A, 8, yeah, it's like 10 of them where the administration recommends approval of an independent contract that's being funded by the Home and School Association. So I was just curious why we, the board, is approving contracts that the solicitor, which normally the solicitor would have reviewed our contracts. This is one that he doesn't review. So I'm just wondering why we are approving something.
I would gather we have the funds at this point. I suspect that the Home and School Association has either donated or provided us the funds, and now we are engaging in the contract. That would be my guess. No? And then in all likelihood, they should not be on the agenda.
Mr. Fink, did you want to make comment about it?
Oh, no, I'm joking. No, typically in these cases, the money does not get donated. It goes direct to the vendor. I think in my years here, traditionally, these items have been on the board agendas, which is why they continue to be so.
But we've asked this question over and over again. Why are we approving contracts that are not tied to the school district contractually?
And it's a good question. This is the first time I've recognized that it's been here, and it may have been said before, brought before. I do know that one of the nice things about having them on here is that makes us aware of what's going on in our buildings, what presenters are coming in, but I don't know if that's enough validity to have them on there. I don't want to, so it's not a matter of we want legal to review these contracts as much as a matter of whether they should be, we should be voting on them, right?
So Clinton, Mr. Jackson, sorry, I think you bring up a good point. My question is, so as far as having the understanding of what's going on in the schools and the content of what is being delivered, do we feel comfortable with this not being on the agenda and just being under the jurisdiction of the school administrator?
I would say no, because I do think that ultimately if there's a presentation or something like that, to some extent, if it's made it this far, we probably should know about it. So maybe it could at least be under as an information item.
Yeah.
But not something that, can we do it that way?
Well, I mean, there are two components to it. There's the money, but then there's also the terms. The money is one thing. And if we're not spending the money, that the presumption at that point would be, maybe we don't need to deal with it. But then there are the terms, right? And, if we are going to be agreeing to an indemnification provision or some sort of hold harmless, you are the only ones that can do that for anything that goes on in your buildings. So I think we'd want to scrutinize what we're approving for these third parties. Frankly, if this is the PTO from Limerick who wants to bring in a certain group to do a presentation, that can be them with that group, and then the PTO would sign our facilities use agreement, and that would be it in my view. That's probably the cleanest way to do it, because we're only providing the facility at that point. So I think that's probably a bigger revisit of all of these agreements as to what we do need to do. Perfect example would be when students raise money for a prom or post-prom event that will be occurring that comes through, say, the high school's general fund. We do need to sign that. But those third parties, those individuals or entities that are really not under our umbrella, I think we can be more circumspect as to what comes on our agenda.
And actually, I asked that question, not because I have a certain opinion. I wanted to hear what other folks said. However, it did come to mind that we do get those board memo updates from the building administrators with what's going on in their schools. And so maybe the ask is just for them to be very deliberate. And again, I don't know what the answer is here. I'm not necessarily providing a solution, but making sure that they are deliberate with including things like assemblies and home and school spends.
In the past, as Ms. Strozowski said, it's been an informational item listed on the, my concern is that we are approving something that we have no idea what's written, and indemnification is a very complex term, as Mr. Fitzgerald used. And I just want to make sure that we're not signing up for something that we don't know what we're signing up for.
I agree with Mr. Jackson. I think we can just take that out. I don't see the point of even having it in there.
So it seems like there may be multiple layers to this. And I really would like to, before we kind of make the decision that going forward, we're no longer going to have them for approval, because there may be some reasons that we have not really thought of here at the table. Could we put this on, do a little research maybe and put this on the agenda for next month as a discussion item? Because I'd like to make sure we're covering all the legal ramifications with this, or if there's something else there. Is that something, Mr. Jackson, you would?
I would support that, and the intent is not to stop this process for the school, just to make sure from a legal perspective, we're on solid ground.
Right, okay, and Mr. Fitzgerald is nodding there that you're in agreement with that too.
Oh, absolutely. I do agree that to the extent that there are engagements here that do not need to be on our agenda, that's a good thing. We do want to prevent that. And this is a long agenda, as somebody acknowledged. So if we can take some things off that are not under your jurisdiction, perfect.
So the question becomes, how do we proceed for tonight? Are we going to just go forward with tonight's vote here, or remove
I think
these
we
for
have
approval?
a motion and a second. So I think all that's left to be would be to vote, unless somebody wants to make a motion to remove that, right? Isn't that how that works?
to amend the agenda. In the meantime, though, did you have something you wanted to say, Mrs. Weingarten?
I had a question. If tabling it, if say we don't vote on it tonight and we table it to bring up a discussion, would any of these events, would it affect any of these events? Okay.
It probably shouldn't,
Right.
in part because it's not our money, and in part because we're taking the approach that somebody else should be signing the contract anyway. So and again, tomorrow morning, there'll be 9 different people calling me saying, this is going to affect the contract in the following ways, but it shouldn't, based on our discussion tonight.
Yeah, I mean, there's even an item on here that is of no cost. So it's an awareness, right? So yeah, so I mean, that answers, right?
So for me, we've been doing it as long as I've been here. I would prefer that we approve them tonight and then we share our process through board memo and through some sort of presentation or part of my report next month so we can have the right process in place moving forward, if that's okay. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, unless there's a motion to amend the agenda, we have a motion and a second. So we would be voting on A through E, separated out is D20. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
So the motion passes. All right, so now we are looking at under Finance D20. Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
So last week I asked about this and really just trying to understand, Mr. Fink, if you could, why we need to add this frontline now. Could you talk that this frontline program? I realized that a lot of what you said last week, I think really referenced that the mechanism in place isn't necessarily something that's maybe easily understandable, and that this would provide a system to the planning in your office. Are we getting the best pricing for that? Is that
Are we what?
getting the best pricing for that?
Yeah,
to
we
do
talked
this
about
now?
that last week. We've negotiated it down. In fact, I think Mr. Schaefer asked that very question, which I responded, yes.
And it's because it is going to legitimately, systematically organize that office for,
Yeah, it's essentially, it's an integrated tool. It'll bolt right onto our current Skyward system. So the data will flow right through there, as opposed to what we do now, which is the Excel workbook model that I built when I first came here, which is more labor intensive. And we spend a lot of time in my office just filling out the charts that make the model and to update the model each year, each budget season.
and your information is going to flow right into that system as well, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Jackson, your mic is on.
I'm sorry.
I wanted to hear you say something. All right.
I think Mr. Fink put a memo in the Friday memo.
He did, he did. At great length, I will say, Mr. Fink. A lengthy part of the board memo.
All right, so if there are no more questions or comments from the board, we're looking at Finance D20. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Moving on to Property A through D. Is there a
Separate
motion?
A.
Separate A. All right, so we are looking at Property B through D. Is there a motion? Second?
Second.
Questions or comments? No. All right, so all those in favor of property B through D, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Looking at property A, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
questions, comments?
Okay, so last week I brought this up. and
Yes,
I-
ma'am.
And I am happy to see that it went down. But the increase went from 12.5% to 10%. If I am to understand that correctly. Yep. And I understand the argument behind it, but my concern is that in my life, when I deal with contracts, a contract is a contract all day long. You don't get to go back and say, I estimate it wrong, or I didn't account for labor shortages or gas increases. Those things, yes, does it cut into your profit margin? Unfortunately, it does. But a contract is a contract is a contract. And unless there was language that said it could be amended, I don't see how we can possibly do this. Why should the district incur this additional amount? And we still don't have an answer. If we don't approve this, are they going to pull out? Do they want to end the contract? Do we know for certain that if we say no to the 10%, that we no longer have those services? And why do I feel like we're the ones that are over a barrel when we have a 3-year contract? I don't understand that part of it.
Okay, I'm here to explain it.
That's good.
We do not have a 3-year contract. We had a PO, and what the gentleman provided was advanced pricing. And it was based on 1.5 increase per year. Okay, so a year ago, 21, he gave us pricing 3 years out, which sometimes it works for you, sometimes it works against you. This is the only year right now, which is year 2. Year 1 is already done. Year 2 starts next month. Year 3 is nothing more than a price proposal. There's no contractual relationship there. So we're dealing with year 2. So the original pricing was 1.5. Based on his advanced pricing out to us, he's taken a hit. He tried to come back for some additional cost. We went back. He went down to 10%. It's actually 8.5 because it was 1.5 was already included. So your question is, we're not over a barrel. We just have to make a decision.
So do you have an answer to the question that if we do not approve this, are they separating from Springford? Are they not doing it?
I don't know what the stock market's going to do tomorrow. So I don't know exactly.
But I did ask that question last week and I just can't seem to get that answer. If we don't do it and we honor what we thought was our agreement or whatever terminology you want to use, are they then pulling away? And what happens? What happens with the next year?
Colleen, let me see that. My understanding was this was done under an RFP a couple of years ago. And presumably under that RFP, there was going to be, and this has been done in the district a number of times, there usually for kind of options for successive years, but based on updated pricing based on conditions at the time. Presumably that's what's occurred here. It would not surprise me that they've come up with these higher numbers. In this industry, we're seeing that everywhere, especially where there's a lot of fuel-based issues. My guess is if we don't do this, there is a high likelihood that they will say that we aren't going to be able to service Springford under the circumstances. And we would be put into a bit of a precarious position at this point in the year.
I'm not going to agree with that, Mr. Fitzgerald. We don't know what they will do. We've had extensive conversations with them. That's an option. At any point in time, they can pull out. And as far as next year, nothing is defined for next year. Next year doesn't exist. The only thing that exists right now is year 2, which if we approve this, will start in 2 weeks. If we don't approve it, then we will go out and get additional bids for this year only.
Okay, so let me just clarify a little bit. One is we do not have any certainty that they would stay or walk if we don't approve this. We don't have that right now.
There is no written documentation to
Okay.
attest to that.
My question is, okay, so when we went out and we got bids for these a couple years ago, right? They came in with a bid. And they were chosen, excuse me, they were chosen over other, say, landscape contractors out there. Correct? So we could do this increase and we could potentially be, we might have done better with one of the others.
And now remember, it being an RFP does not require lowest responsive bid.
True.
So, and by the way, Mr. Hunter, I think has arrived on the scene.
Yeah, I'm here. So we did the RFQ that went out last year. They were the lowest bid that was provided. I had conversation with Charlestown Landscaping in regards to the working session meeting, the board's concerns that were brought up at that point. He went through, we took the third year that was on the original action item off the table so that we could see where the market, if the market settles at that point. He had proposed his compromise at the additional 8.5%, again, was to cover costs for labor and fuel costs and to be able to provide the service that we need at Springford School District. He's provided the services he provided last year. They were excellent. And again, this is trying to work collectively together to create a long-term relationship. So to answer your question, we did not get to an exact answer as to what will happen. Again, I can't speak for Charleston Landscaping, but that exact question was not answered with the hopes that it didn't have to be answered if it wasn't voted forward.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your efforts going back. I do. Are you saying that, I thought somebody had said here, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we had a long-standing relationship with this company. They were the lowest bid last year, but how long have they been with us?
This is their second year.
That's not a terribly long time.
I can appreciate the concern here for this increase. However, if we vote against it, we just go out for bid. If the board doesn't want to support this initiative, we will go out to bid to get 3 additional.
Not necessarily, though, because we still don't have an affirmative answer. I mean,
He is not, I would not give you an affirmative answer if I was in his position. He's playing his cards from a business perspective. My position as the chair of property, that I think this is a fair consideration under the circumstances. It is our recommendation. The board has the right to vote this up or vote this down. If we decide not to approve this, we would go out and get 3 bidders. And
I think we would see what his response is first. If it goes that way, I'm one board member, if it goes that way.
if you're asking, will we go back again? We can do that. However, the clock's ticking on us to go out. We need to start lawn cutting within the next 2 weeks across the board. So if it's the board's intent not to support this, not support it, we cut bait, and Mr. Hunter will get 3 other bidders and try to get a quick turnaround time so we can complete our lawn cutting for the year.
And I hear what you're saying, and I just would add to that, that we've had many discussions at this table about how people want to get into Springford. Well, this could either be an opening or not an opening. We're not sure yet. I'm looking through a different lens. I deal with contracts and negotiations all day. And if let's just To give a quick analogy, if a seller and a buyer were under contract and the seller said they were taking the refrigerator and the buyer said, well, I'm not going to buy the house without the refrigerator, that would not be acceptable because it was already agreed to. And that's where I'm stuck.
I can appreciate that. And again, we all deal with contracts every day. The board, it's property's recommendation. What the board decides to do, the board can decide to do, and we will go from there.
So Mr. Hunter has been our knight in shining armor for years now, and all of a sudden we're going to start questioning his decisions and his expertise. I don't understand that. I mean, who is in a better position to negotiate this or understand what's going on here than he is? So I don't understand why all of a sudden, it's a big deal.
All right. Can I ask just a clarifying question? So for the roughly $63,000 that this may impact us, will that get us over budget, or will we still retain falling into lines for the annual maintenance budget?
It is still within the budget, operating budget.
Thank you.
And the actual cost, just for clarity, it's $60,632. That's the amount. The $63,000 amount on the action item is if the fuel costs, because of the sanctions against Russian oil, if they increase. That's the reason why that language was put in place. So as long as the gas costs stay below $5, we're not going to have any additional increase. So it's going to be $60,632 as a total cost. That's a worst case scenario cost in the action item. If we had to pay above $6 a gallon, a fuel surcharge was to be added in there.
The purpose of my question was, I mean, to me, I get it. Mrs. Fazowski, you're asking a very good question. However, for me, we've got a great person in charge and we've got a great committee. And as long as we're still maintaining that budget level or below it, I mean, this is the way things go from year to year.
Okay, if there's no other comments, we have a motion on the floor for property A. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The motion passes. Moving on to programming and curriculum, we have A through double V. Is there a motion? And a second? Questions or comments?
First question. I see the author's name was included on two of the books. Did someone ask a question?
There was the author's names were added for two of the books that are being ordered. That was an amendment to the agenda from the working one. Do you know?
Dr. Wright, those had been transposed, so they were included before, but the authors were transposed.
Great, thank you for the clarification. If there are no other questions, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We're moving on to conferences and workshops, A through F. Is there a motion? A second? Okay. Any questions or comments? Okay, no questions or comments. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Moving on to other business, A through D. So I think we need to separate B. I'm not sure the procedures here. We need to put an Oh, D is just a first reading, so we're not doing D. We're looking at A through C. And separating B,
A.
separate A. Okay, so that would be one at a time. So we're looking now at other business A. Is there a motion? A second? Questions or comments?
I'm not the smartest guy in the world, so I know we talked about this last week, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around the ceiling just required for us to compensate or cover the cost of the student travel. Can you go over that one more time, please?
Sure. Board policy 122 deals with this specifically. It talks about clubs, trips. It talks about, it's actually, I think it's co-curricular and extracurricular activities, right? For PMEA and PIAA, they are specifically mentioned in that policy that up to the state level tournament, the state level festival, in this case, the state level ensembles, the district will cover reasonable expenses, which is lodging, which is meals, which is what comes with the process of going there. There would be things that could be denied. We've not been in that situation before. These are standard items, but those are explicitly mentioned in board policy 122.
Would there be a correlation if it was athletics at that same level?
Correct. That's the PIAA piece.
So
PIAA and PI and PMEA are both. I equate them. The PMEA system I call like the PIAA of music.
So the same would apply to the athletic side of this also.
That is correct.
Okay. Sounds like Joe Cerisi, but okay.
We certainly can revisit the policy at some point if you'd like to. All right, any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Now we're looking at other business B. The administration recommends the approval of one of us for a seat on the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit Board of Directors for the term beginning July 1st and ending on June 30th, 2023. So we are looking for nominations first.
Yes, so this is, you mentioned last week that you would like to remain on, and this is more of a formality, is my understanding from the MCIU. So I would nominate Dr. Wright to stay on in that position.
I second.
So are we voting then on the nomination part or on the whole policy?
I think unless there's another nomination, I would just do all those in favor of Dr. Wright, say aye.
Okay. Well, I think, thank you very much. If all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to represent the board for the MCIU to continue. I appreciate it. All right, so other business C, the following policies that have been brought forward to be rescinded and retired. Is there a motion? A second?
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I think there's just one clarification. Someone mentioned, why are these, the agenda is 100 pages. Well, you can see here, it says attachment A5, attachment A6. So all of the things that we go through that we've talked about in our committees are part of the larger agenda, where the agenda itself was only 17 pages. All of the things that we talk about and reference are in there. So you'll see here, there are 20 policies that you'll find in full in the back of this document, which is probably taking up at least 20 to 30 pages themselves. So I just wanted to point out, since that was a question from earlier.
For what it's worth, many districts don't even put the attachments on. I think it's good that you do. There's many districts that just have the agenda and it references policies or contracts and you would have no idea, but the attachments are, that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's a very good thing. And there's also the meeting minutes that we referenced in the beginning when we approve past meeting minutes. Those are also part of this. So I just wanted to point out, if you do want to take a look at those specific agendas, they are available online, but we have them here.
There's also been tons of board meetings that we've had where the agenda's been 6 to 8 pages and has gone on for many moons, as opposed to this is 17 pages, but there's an awful lot on curriculum and personnel in here this evening to approve. So it's a lengthier agenda, but it's not 100 pages.
Right. Yeah. All right. Any other questions or comments from board? So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion passes. So now we are on to board comment. Before we, we're just noting D, that the following policies are submitted for first reading. There are 5 of them there that are attached. So the policy committee will be addressing those in the future. Moving on to board comment before
No,
we.
they're on a first reading, so they'll be up on the next agenda for approval.
Oh, okay, thank you. They'll be on the next agenda for, next month's agenda for approval. Thank you very much for the clarification. All right, board comment. I'd like to make the comment first that one of our wonderful teachers, Jackie Ritter, is here tonight, and I'm embarrassing her to mention that she chose to spend her birthday with us. So thank you very much, Jackie. Yeah, we didn't sing to you, so good. Any other board
Mr. Mayor,
comment?
we need to discuss your celebration planning, all right?
Tom's.
Doesn't matter.
Any other board comments?
I brought up previously, if there was going to be any public acknowledgement of some of our student athletes who are state champs. And I know we brought out the National Merit Scholars and some other folk, and I wonder if we're going to do the same for our athletes before the end of the year.
Correct. In April, Mr. McDaniel is planning for that.
Anything else?
2 light comments. Number 1, I had the opportunity to see the indoor color guard prior to this meeting for about 30 minutes. I just want to say how I am impressed I am that we're starting to develop that skill at such a young age with our 5th and 6th graders. And I could only stay to watch up to 8th grade, but very impressive. So for everyone that was involved, bravo. And then the other thing, I just want to make a quick plug for Rams Rally for Ukraine, because I know that this weekend is going to be the first drop-off event that happens at the 5th and 6th grade center. And I believe specifically it was referenced today in the school that there is a need for diapers specifically, as well as new socks and undergarments. So if you have capacity to help out, come by this weekend.
Thank you for bringing both of those to the table. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, having said that, we are going to move on then to public to be heard. Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to be heard?
At this, I'm sorry, there is one comment to be heard on Zoom. Stacy, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself, state your first and last name as well as your township.
Stacy Salazzo, Limerick, PA. I just had a couple questions regarding the PSSA presentation tonight. So one, just why are we now comparing Springford against state data? I mean, before, usually when there were presentations with school board, with school performance and stuff, we would be comparing to other top ranking districts. And I didn't see that in the presentation tonight. Why also was only the advanced and proficient data being shared? Curious about the other basic and below basic and historically underperforming categories as well. And then the other one, during the presentation, there was a couple slides with pre-COVID data that were also, the math numbers were a little lower. It looks like they jumped up and then dropped down again. Instead of just pointing out that the data shouldn't count this past year or so, kind of curious why the pre-COVID numbers seem a little lower. Maybe it goes back to some curriculum issues that kind of need to be looked at. And then, regarding the summer RAMs and stuff like that, what definition are you guys using for what constitutes the needs for the students to be chosen for summer RAMs? That wasn't defined. Also, I know there's a lot of there's short staff and teachers being out and things like that. So I know with the absence and stuff, there have been in some of the buildings, some kids sitting in cafeterias and the gyms and stuff, sitting on their Chromebooks because they're either the teachers are out and there aren't enough subs. So just it's a concern that kids are just sitting on their Chromebooks in the cafeterias instead of in their classrooms, and there isn't somebody there. So I don't know. I guess obviously there really is a staff shortage and what's being done about that. I know with the sub pay, I don't know how high ours is. I think it was like around 150 or something, but then like Wissahickon is 175 and Methacton's like 165. I don't know if that has something to do with it or just there just aren't enough hands, to help out. I also know that there was a sign up sheet for parents to start coming in to sign up for lunches and recesses in some of the buildings. So I guess that shows how much how short everything is. And then the last thing was just the communications audit that's going to be going on. Just there was no details about what are their deliverables, what's the audit providing, and basically kind of what is it for and what are they going to do for the district. That was it. Thank you. Good job.
Is there anyone else on Zoom?
At this time, there are no further comments on Zoom.
Okay, anybody within our building here who would like to make public comment? Please approach the podium.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Rudy Govan, Royersford, Pennsylvania. First, the first thing that I would like to say is I would like to apologize last month for the board member who showed some, she said she was sorry, and I kind of went off a little bit, and I apologize. Please know my comments last month were always to be comments of a father, never anything that is to tear down or belittle Springford. It was an issue, and I'm a father bringing the issue to the board. And I would like to, come back as a follow-up to my comments last month to thank the board. I'm not going to go into names for people who have reached out to me and have addressed and appear to be addressing the comments and the concerns that I had. I thank you. I thank Mr. Rogers, who is a great person. I had to use his name last week because he was the person that I spoke to. And my comments were never to tear down, but always to be respectful. But I had to speak as a father. Again, I thank everyone for this board, who I truly believe has a concern and has a heartfelt concern to change some of the things that have been an issue, but just hasn't been spoken. I am here to help. I'm not just here to spill out and blur out some of the issues that I had, but I am here as a person who has some skills, who could also help. And it just so happened to be my child. Our responsibility as parents and as people of this community is to ensure that moving forward, that the people coming behind us have a better place to learn, live, and grow. And I truly want to be a part of that. That's why through my hard work and process, we've chose to live here. So again, thank you to the board. Thank you to the people who reached out to me. And I look forward to working with everyone and also seeing the continued growth. And if I don't, I'll be back. But thank you again. I appreciate everybody's time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hello again, Tony Patrick. So I just wanted to clarify that one, the ARP SSR contract that you guys signed was pre-COVID, and it was dated for August 2nd, 2021. And it will go from March 13th through September 30th, 2024. And in order for you guys to get these funds, you had to apply for them. Again, that's money, a contract that you're getting. from the state. I don't understand what the problem was with the landscaper. Grass has to get cut. So it's amend the contract. We want to see our school looking good. To go over, let's see, with the curriculum, instruction, educational technology again. When I saw those numbers up there for the school and you skipped over 2020, why did we skip over it? Just because they don't have the numbers or something? The state didn't have the numbers for us? Okay. So when will they be out for us to
There
get
were,
those
there were
numbers?
no numbers for that year. There was no PSSA testing that year.
Oh, okay. So see, as a taxpayer, I don't know that. I don't know where to find that information at. And as Stacy had said, I saw on one of the Facebooks, social media about the children in the school, in the cafeteria, being sent to the cafeteria, the principal or somebody is watching over them to do some extra homework because there's not enough subs. We had 6 pages on here, you know, in the agenda of people who are resigning and then rehires. And like someone said about the exit review, why are the teachers leaving? There's a lot of them that were leaving. I just want to know what's going on with this whole thing and how can we get, as a community and taxpayers, get on these committees. If we can have one person from the community or from the school be on one of these committees of like the community relations, the personnel, legislative committees, why can't we be on that? Can someone figure that out for us? Because I can't find any of this information on your website. As a taxpayer, I can't even go to, you know, thank you, Karen, for telling me about the amendments because like the appendixes that are way in the back. It doesn't say Appendix A, it says like 503 or 512 and stuff like that. And when you pointed that out to me, now I could see it. But as a taxpayer, how can I tell my elderly neighbors about what's going on in the school? Should I start putting signs out saying that you guys are doing this behind our back? Yeah, okay, we know that, Colleen, look, thank you. Just, I need information, I need to know how to get in touch with you.
All of the committee meetings are public and you're welcome to come to any of the meetings that you see on the agenda. It's not here, but it's totally separate. It's fully public accessible. You're welcome to come, sit, ask questions.
And just to further add from Mr. Jackson's comments, the committee structure is public knowledge. It is on the district website. It is established policy that's been in place for decades surrounding who can be on the committees. And it's the board members, but certainly it's open to the public. And the reference with regard to the American Recovery Plan, ESSER dollars, that's not a contract. Those are federal subsidies that all districts are eligible for.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present who would like to speak? If not, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
How many more people are on Zoom? Anybody on Zoom?
Is there anyone in,
One
how many
person?
people who have joined our meeting tonight on Zoom? Do we have that number?
It was about 20.
About 20, and then Mrs. Deardorff said she saw about 31 there. Okay, and then some of those were our employees also.
Yeah,
like, right?
about 6 or 8 of them were employees.
Okay,
And we had one speaker from Zoom.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Meeting adjourned.